Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. And finally, a sunny day. It's been raining here. This is This area is a deciduous rainforest. I didn't actually know there was such a thing. I've heard of tropical rainforests, but I didn't even know there's such things as a deciduous rainforest until I moved here some time ago. Anyway, today we're going to talk about the ubiquitous elephant in the room. And, it's amazing, Scotty, it's amazing. You watch the news and they're reporting this, reporting that. People are interacting. And I think seems like a lot of conflict in the world today, just on a personal level, international level, global level. And just a lot of craziness going on. I mean, it's a whole other topic we could talk about, but just all the conflict with respect to transsexuals and all the different, how many genders are there type thing. And Scotty, like you mentioned to me just a little bit ago before we went on the air, the whole thing with Hunter Biden. And what were you saying about that, Scott?
Well, it's just, how they have the press briefings, and it used to be just that one guy from Peter Ducey from Fox that would be yelling out and asking the tough questions. And now it's transitioning. It seems that all of them are starting to ask the tough questions.
Yeah, boy.
About
and
this.
Alan Dershowitz, that retired Harvard law professor that's on a lot of
Dershowitz.
news.
Yeah.
What's that?
Alan Dershowitz, yeah.
Yeah, Dershowitz. He was saying that, this is only the beginning. They'll probably go after Hunter for a lot more things in the future. So it's not over by any means. But just conflicts everywhere. Everybody. I mean,
yeah.
You might say, well, wait a minute, what about World War II? Am I still there, Scotty? Can you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Okay, there we go. But it wasn't like this. There was, a specific thing. In fact, there was a book that I read part of it. It's called The Psychology of Tyranny. And it's very interesting because it talks about the dynamic of group consciousness, really. And it cites a study that was done in, where was that done? I want to say Stanford, maybe it was somewhere else. But this was back in the 70s, I think. And they took a group of psychology students and they had them go in the basement of the psychology building, and they divided them into two groups. One group was the prisoners and the other were the prison attendants. And they just observed, in the study. And they said it was incredible how abusive the prison guards became toward the prisoners. And in fact, they planned on doing that study for a month. They had to cancel it after 4 or 5 days because they were just so abusive. And that's an interesting study in human dynamics, isn't it, Scotty?
Yeah, for sure.
But then they did some other studies, and they were finding that group consciousness becomes powerful when they're all sharing a cause. And it can be different kinds of causes. We're all Americans, that's a cause. Christians coming together, that's a cause. And those sort of things help the group consciousness and to help the individuals. And they were talking about how people who have a strong identity like that just tend to be healthier psychologically. But then the interesting thing is, if there's an opposition group that comes along, then that group becomes abusive towards the opposition group. That is an interesting study. And we certainly see that going on. In fact, that's getting created in the world today. You got the blacks against the whites, and you got, of course, the classic hierarchy, the uh, administrative leaders, and then there's the people that are maybe the workers, for example, and how there's a polarization there, and the whole corporate structure thing. And so that dynamic really comes into play. And now in the news, they report this conflict, that conflict, blacks rioting, Christians being attacked, Jews being attacked. And one thing that I noticed that they don't know. They don't address the elephant in the room, the real dynamic, what is really going on. And in fact, if you were to tell them, people wouldn't really believe it because they don't understand the real essence of the dynamic of group consciousness, which the ancient seers have explained thousands of years ago. And the pundits to this day are well aware of it, the Vedic pundits. It's amazing the amount of stuff that's in the Veda, the amount of stuff that the Vedic pundits know that the world is oblivious to. They just don't pay any attention, And a lot of it is so provable that there's validity to it because, diameter of the Earth and how many planets in the solar system, and the knowledge is vast. And technologies, buildings they built, structures they built thousands of years ago that we still don't understand how they could have possibly done it. But they turn a blind eye to it. It's incredible. And that speaks to, you see, there's this idea of different planes. They'll talk about the different lokas in the Vedic literature, the different levels of existence, the different planes of existence, the different heavens, in fact. But we don't even have to, look that cosmically or that far-reaching to realize that there are different planes of human mentality, different worlds, if you will. And there's polarization between those planes. There's polarization between those worlds, just naturally. One world view doesn't accommodate another, doesn't respect the other, doubts the other, is suspicious of the other. And that's the ubiquitous elephant in the room. Ubiquitous, it's everywhere. It permeates everything. Interpersonal relationships, global relationships, world wars, particularly now in this age, because now the real ubiquitous elephant in the room is this phase transition that we've talked so much about and that the ancient seers have talked about and predicted for this time even 5,000 years ago. And Jyotishis see it in the Jyotish. Even the numerologists are saying this is the time that's happening. And it is happening. And all of a sudden, when you throw in that factor, then all of a sudden, all the craziness that's going on in the world, it finally makes sense. And without that context, without things being put in that context, it's such a narrow, small view of the real dynamic. So it's the ubiquitous elephant in the room. It's the real global pandemic is the phase transition and the effect it's having on people. The good news is that it's transitioned into a golden age. And we're going to see that coming about. But boy, that transition is tough, isn't it? I don't know, Scotty. From what I observe in my world of personal interactions, it seems like so many people, there's so much conflict and so much stress. And it's just, off the chart. Are you noticing the same thing, Scotty?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just everywhere. And I think some of this communication that we are able to do now is like it's a blessing and a curse because it just seems to like just push things faster, or I don't know, just that's weird.
I was going up an elevator. I was in an elevator, and the elevator. This was just very recently, a week or so ago, and the elevator stopped at one floor, and this guy got on, and then the elevator continued to, well, it's going down actually, go down to the first floor, and I mean, this guy, he was quite a impressive specimen of a human being. He was huge and just muscles. And so I said to him, I said, I just feeling friendly. I don't know. He seemed like a nice guy. And I said, gee, I said, do you lift weights? He said, no. And I said, are you a football player or an athlete of some kind? No. He said, I'm a businessman. And he was very resentful. And I don't know. I mean, you might say I'm pretty naive with the tensions in the world, but I realized based on his response that he felt like I had that dynamic going because he's a black man. And so, he kind of felt like I was throwing him in a category of, oh, black guy, nice building, nice looking, dressed nice, must be making money from playing football. And I felt sad for him, because I was impressed with him, and then afterwards I started thinking about it. I guess I'm kind of oblivious because we have to be careful. There's so much tension between groups these days that you have to watch what you're saying to the extent where you can't even pay somebody a friendly compliment, What do you think about that, Scotty? Was I kind of...
Well, that what just came to my mind when you were talking about the story is, like here in California, I don't know,
Mhm.
the dynamic is different than what you think of in North Carolina or the South or that
Yeah,
kind
that was South Carolina near Savannah.
of. Okay, yeah. I'm just wondering, how because I don't have a feel for it from not being out there, how that dynamic is here.
Yeah, but on the news you
Yeah.
see the whole racial thing is
Oh
certainly
yeah.
national, it's even global,
Yeah.
California as well,
Yeah.
they wanted to give reparations to the blacks in California, significant amounts of money.
Yeah, that's in, and
Uh,
the only place that you really hear about that is in San
yeah,
Francisco. Like down
uh-huh.
here, because we
In
have
LA.
an African American family that works. They go to school with us, and
Mm-hmm.
you really don't get that feeling. But I don't know if it's just the type of people that we're hanging out with, or but because we've had the talks of reparations and stuff like that, and saying it's kind of, they were talking about how they thought it was kind of ridiculous, you know.
Yeah. Well, the problem is it wouldn't work anyway because the idea would be to help people move forward with their evolution, their development as a people, and things like that. But money isn't going to do that. Uh, uh, all you're going to do is provide them with money to fulfill the belief system of whatever it is they're living at the time, their
Yeah.
habits, their routines, it's not going to solve any problems, you know.
Well, yeah, and I think that that would not only go to say for them, but for anyone. You know what I mean? It's not just,
For sure, of
you know what I
course.
mean?
Yeah, that's
Like,
the point. Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. Good. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah,
yeah, because it's
yeah,
like, you know,
yeah. But here's another thing, and this goes way back to really the way I was brought up. And I was with Marishi since I was 21, I think. And so really, he raised me. I mean, that's how it feels to me. And the relationship with money, living in the ashram and just following him all these decades, it's so different from what's traditional. And like even with Mount Soma as an example, I had a goal to create Mount Soma. And so you start with the goal. Maharshi say highest first, you start with the goal. Okay, this is what we're wanting to accomplish. We want to build this enlightened city. Okay, now let's work backwards. And what I mean by that is, in contrast to working from the beginning in the typical way, in a typical way, if you hire somebody to do something like that, what is the first thing they want, Scotty? If you're to hire somebody to do a really high-powered, important, big thing like that, what's the first thing that comes to mind is what they want to get out of it?
Money.
Yeah. Exactly. They want to, and to do something, a big project like this, they want a big paycheck. And so they start with that. Okay, give me, how many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and then I'll work towards your goal. That's not the way that I was brought up. The way I was brought up, I mean, I lived in the ashram all those years. We didn't ever think about being paid. In fact, we paid, for the privilege of living there, of being there. So the goal was what came first, and we just did what we had to do to accomplish the mission. And then there's this idea too that, oh well, I'm an accountant, or I'm an attorney, or I'm a whatever, and so I deserve more money for what I'm going to do for the organization than somebody who doesn't have any special skills. And that's the way people think, but it's not the way we thought. We had a goal, and we were going after the goal, shoulder to shoulder. It wasn't about money and how much we were going to be paid and who deserved more money than the other guy, or looking over our shoulder and, well, if he's getting this, then I deserve it. It had nothing to do with it. And we did what was needed. I remember Maharshi used to say, see the job, do the job, avoid the misery. And that's what we did. If there was something to accomplish, something that needed to be done, you didn't sit there and think, what plane of existence do I live on? What caste system or what have you. See the job, do the job, get it done. We have a goal. It's a shared goal. Let's accomplish the mission. And there were some guys with skills, be it accounting, for example, who did the books, and business people who could keep the thing cash flowing. And so that's what they did. But they weren't a privileged group, And so what I have found, and this is, I guess, the point, is that these different arenas, these different worlds that people live in, they just naturally, in the world today at least, particularly in this period of phase transition, there's a polarization that in the world today, there's a gap in the people who make little money oftentimes resent the people who make a lot of money. And then you get into the whole thing about communism would be a good thing. Of course, communism doesn't work, because what you really do there is create a super upper class, and then everybody else is equal. And the whole thing is so bogus, really. But I'm having to learn, I really had to learn how the mentality in the world today is so diametrically opposed, opposite of what I lived in my life. And even creating Mount Soma, it wasn't about if I could make money, it was about the goal. How do we accomplish the mission, There was a nice quote by Ramana Maharshi. He said, the trick is to have the boat in the water, but not have the water in the boat. See, when we live our lives, when we try to accomplish something, when we do something, we get caught up. I like to say it's like we get caught up in the weeds. People bicker, water's getting in the boat. all the different issues that people have. And if you could just keep the water out of the boat, but and here's the other thing, have the boat in the water. And this applies not just to, Mount Zomer building an enlightened city, it applies to life in general. Because also having the boat in the water, I think a lot of people, you'll see it, they don't want to put the boat in the water in the first place. They want life to be easy. They want to float through life. They don't want to have their boat in the water. But like Ramana Maharshi said, the trick is to have the boat in the water, but just keep the water out of the boat. That's how you accomplish things in life. That's how you become successful. That's how you have a sense of self-gratification and self-respect. They've done studies and they find that, self-actualization is what brings fulfillment to people. Now, self-actualization is on different levels. It's on accomplish something. It's on having your boat in the water. It's also, of course, self-actualization on a deeper level is evolving in the direction of enlightenment, if you will. And the technique, see, there's a technique that Maharshi used to say, do less and accomplish more. It's a great principle. We oftentimes make things harder than they have to be. And then we kind of even maybe take pride in, I work so hard. And that's great. I respect that, but there's a finesse and a strength of doing less and accomplishing more. It's just called efficiency. And in fact, do nothing and accomplish everything. In other words, come from that place of no thingness. Live that. And then everything else falls into place. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about living in harmony with nature. Kind of like a fluid martial arts, Aikido master versus somebody who just takes a club and, beats the ground with it, So there's a finesse, and that real finesse isn't rooted in a set of rules or techniques so much as it's rooted in being established in the depth of your being, And that speaks to the idea that we have different levels of our being. And many of us are proficient, even spiritual people are oftentimes proficient on the worldly level of life. But then there's spiritual people who live on the pragmatic level of life, but they'll also talk about how, it's all Shiva for me. I'm dedicated to Shiva or God or Christ or what have you. But see, there's a big quantum leap there, if I'm making sense to you. And real human evolution is the cultivation of the integration along the way so that our emotions are in harmony with nature. So much of our emotions, so much of what our convictions are and what we believe are a result of indoctrinations. They're a result of stress in our own physiology, our own psyche that we project onto the world, our worldview. Like it said, we don't perceive, we project onto. Perception is something that's very rare, really, real perception, because real perception comes in the place where that integration is there, all the way to the very depth of your being, where you're one with something. You don't really perceive anything accurately unless you're one with it. And then that oneness wells up through the field of relativity, the world of separation, but still in harmony with that state of oneness. So you're living that paradox, if you will. But that's not usually the way it works for people, even spiritual people. They have their pragmatic level, their worldview, their worldly view level, whatever it is they've been, if you will, indoctrinated into. That's a kind of a harsh word, indoctrinated, but I think you get the gist. And then they have this affinity for, God is there and God is looking after me, or however they would express it as an individual. But there's this thing that lies at the depth of our emotions that we think of as gut feeling. What's your gut feeling? What's your gut tell you? You know, it's not just an intellectual concept, it's how you feel. And that's a deeper level of your being. But it was Maharshi Patanjali, Yoga Sutras like that. Maharshi Patanjali talked about intuition, and the literal translation from the Sanskrit is often translated as gut feeling, or another way that it's expressed sometimes is the finest feeling level. But gut feeling teaches us something about the integration of things. You see, and it's intuition. When your gut feeling is very refined, then it becomes intuition, and intuitive in a very high sense of the word. You see, because in the deepest level sense of the word, intuition is on the very finest level of existence. When you're not functioning in an integrated manner, you have a gut feeling. You might even say it's my intuition, but it's tainted, if you will, with stresses, biases like that. But I think it's really eye-opening. I think for us to realize that the literal translation is oftentimes gut feeling. Intuition isn't some far-off thing. Not when it's real intuition. It's our gut. You see? Am I making sense there, Scotty?
For sure.
I think it's a beautiful concept,
Oh yeah.
and one that's oftentimes not really understood. You see, it's just simple innocence, really. What is innocence? It's not naivete. Innocence means purity of the being, purity of the physiology. So your gut reaction is an intuitively accurate perception.
Yeah.
You see? Yeah. And so there's that inner continuum. It's not a quantum leap, it's an inner continuum. And isn't it true that so many people, they say they don't, but the way they behave, there's a big gap between their spirituality and how they function in the world, particularly when money gets involved. Then they kicked into that whole gear we talked about a little bit ago about the relationship with money,
Well,
And then also the other thing, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think it's important for people to understand where they come from to, uh, as it comes to how they process things. Are they in their head more? Are they in their heart? Where are they coming from? So that they don't mistake, hey, I'm coming from my depth when I'm really
Yeah,
more.
the depth, that's a good point. The depth of your being is in the deepest level you can feel, and the deepest level you can function from it. It's not usually the deepest level that's there. It's just the deepest you're capable of experiencing and functioning from. But real intuition comes from a deeper place that needs to be cultivated, you know? Uh, and even the idea of coming from your heart. I mean, what does that even mean? Because, coming from your heart can be this la la land, airy fairy thing. Oh, I'm coming from my heart. Or it can be really rooted and grounded in the physiology, in the soul, if you will. It's all good points, Scotty. And then so many people, they don't really feel their power. How many of us actually really do feel our power? In fact, even the word power, that can be a scary thing for people. Oh, power's like a bad word. I have a lot of power. It implies control. It implies some abuse. But I think a lot of people, they don't feel their power. So they believe that they have no significant influence upon other people unless they do things that are harsh, uh, almost attacking. Sometimes when people get upset and they really want to convey a point, what do they say? Isn't it true? They'll oftentimes say the harshest, meanest, cruelest, most hurtful thing they can think of. I've had a number of employees through my years, and I've seen oftentimes an employee, when they get upset about something, they go for the harshest thing. I quit. I'm quitting, because they feel like that's okay. Now I threw a zinger. Now I have some power. But people don't realize you have way more power than you think. You're way more influential on other people than you think. People feel you. People care about you. People care about how you feel. People listen. It may not even feel like they're listening, but they are. We do have a great deal of influence and a great deal of power, if you will, uh, uh, impact on other people. And once you realize that, then you become able to articulate what you're thinking without just flipping out, twanging out, and saying things that are harsh or abusive or invasive, or actually alienate the person you're trying to communicate with. So never forget, really, that your perspective and your being, your influence has a power in and of itself that people feel, and don't undermine it by thinking that it's not felt and therefore lashing out or speaking too harshly. The most powerful words are spoken with kindness, with insight, with understanding. If you really want to convince somebody, don't alienate them. And that's what you do when you're harsh or abusive or threatening or what have you. That making sense there, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. People gravitate to what is familiar. There's this story that's told in, I guess, the Vedic tradition in India. At any rate, I've heard it more than once. There's this guy, and he lived in this little hut, very poverty stricken, dirt floor and just a hut. And something happened, and all of a sudden he got this palace, and so he's living in this tremendous palace. And one day he was like, I miss my hut. Now that really speaks to a profound principle called what is familiar. We gravitate back to what is familiar. And in some ways that can be a very good thing. But in other ways, if it's familiar, for example, to be in an abusive relationship, then a relationship doesn't feel normal to you unless it's abusive. So that's something to watch for. Because what is familiar isn't necessarily always good, but nevertheless, it feels like home. And that's a very common thing. So just a few things here to end on. If there's a delicate matter that you're dealing with another person, do your best to not do it through emails. Emails are so easily misconstrued. And I've seen so many situations where somebody tried to convey a point like that, and it gets more and more misunderstood. Tensions get created. Email is not a good way to try to work out issues. I like this quote, and these are in the blog. It says, the best teachers are those who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see. That reminds me of a time when I was teaching my classes, and somebody put up her hand and she said, well, why do you teach us something one day and then teach us the opposite the next? And she said, you teach us one thing one day and then you teach us something different. I said, right. And that's the point. Let's look in this direction. But you don't find truth by memorizing another person's words or another person's teachings. That's just being spoon-fed. Let's look in this direction, and then you find the truth within your own self. That's where truth lies, you see. But we have to be careful again, because if it's not just a superficial knee-jerk reaction based on unintegrated physiology that's conditioned or programmed, then you get into trouble. But that's irrelevant to the fact that real truth is found, just deeper within. Okay. I like this Winston Churchill has a lot of great quotes. He says, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." That's a really beautiful quote. I could never. And I respect that. A lot of people it's almost like they live their life, how much money they can make. But I had to do a livelihood, a profession where I felt like it wasn't about money, it was about giving, really. And I wanted to give the highest thing I could possibly find. And so sometimes I make a joke of that, and somebody will say, "Why are you doing what you're doing, building Mount Soma?" And I'll make a joke. I'll say, "Well," I said, "I couldn't think of anything better to do." And it's true. That's why I do what I do. I can't think of anything better. And I understand that a lot of people, that technology is of Stapatya and building an enlightened city, it's just too far reaching for them to even wrap their arms around. How can you possibly think that that would work? They didn't believe a cell phone could work until one got built, But I know it'll work. It's in the Veda. It's not coming from me. It's an ancient secret knowledge. Secret not because it's hidden, but because when people read it, if they read about it in a book, it still remains secret to them. They don't buy it, you see. Live your life with purpose. And purpose and meaning. Family, of course, is important. Your personal life, very important. But your profession, what you do out in the world, and it's a delicate balance, admittedly, but it needs to be seamlessly integrated with your personal life. You want a personal life that is fulfilling and that is personal. But nevertheless, you also have a professional life, an outward direction to your life. And navigating those waters so that both are kept in balance. But what the real fuel, some people once said about me, they said, when Michael is happy, Mount Soma is happy. More than one person I know of has said that. And that's because Mount Soma is my life. It's like Panditji says, Michael is Mount Soma, And that's if you will, it's the profession I've chosen. It's something I believe in deeply. And with the world the way it is today in this phase transition, God knows we need that technology, If anybody's interested in moving to Mount Soma, there's so many possibilities. If you want a summer job, you come here, you get free room and board and a stipend, and there's plenty of different kinds of things you could, from working outside to working in the kitchen to this to that, so many different possibilities. If you're interested, send us an email, give us a call, and we'll see what we can work out. All right. Well, thanks so much for listening. And that's it for this week. We'll talk to you again in another week.